It is small. It's not a special cocktail there.
I don't trust what that is.
Dude,
Energy drink.
oh boy, it is.
All righty, welcome back, commissioners. Back to you, Chair Harrington.
Pink drink.
Dean Martin and all kinds of stuff, if you're old enough.
Okay, Kevin.
What?
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to our 1 p.m. work session. Okay, Leslie's done it. Here we are back at the Tuesday, June 4th, 2024, Washington County. Be careful what you're doing with those cables now.
Yeah, they are connected.
My plan worked good.
They're just a little messy today. We'll have to sort those out. Anyway, welcome everyone. We will likely have a very short afternoon together. We have just one topic and it's maybe not too long, but we shall see. It's definitely a conversation with regard to an update on supportive housing services, potential referral by the Metro Council. So we'll now turn it over to our staff to get the latest and greatest update on.
Thank you, Chair Harrington. For the record, Marnie Kyle, I'm one of the assistant county administrators, and I have the pleasure of working with the Housing Department and participating in this effort to influence Metro and help them understand the county's perspective. Mostly what I want to say is you all already know how proud we are of this team, Aaron and Molly. They are not only leaders in Washington County, but they're leaders in the regional conversation. And honestly, we would not be making any progress without their leadership and assistance in convening the Tri-County and influencing us in a good direction. So I'm really here as their cheerleader today, and I will turn it over now. I've been sitting at the table, but they are really the subject matter experts, so I'm going to turn it over to them.
Thank you, Marnie. For the record, Erin Doyle, Senior Government Relations Manager, and I'm just going to kind of give you where we are and where we've been. At this point in time, we are meeting weekly with Metro staff, and the we, just to be clear, is each county has brought a CAO representative, so we have Marnie at the table, the program directors, and someone who is a GR or a board staff person in the room. And Metro has brought their COO, their GR staff, their program director, and their chief financial officer into these conversations. And we meet on a weekly basis. It's not the same day every week. So some days it's every 4 days and some days it's every 10. And we spend about an hour kind of talking through what is on the table, what could be on the table. And we've covered some of that with you in the past, but where we had focused and provided previous updates on were around the possibility of a Metro referral related to the supportive housing services tax measure that would expand the use of those dollars to include the development of permanent supportive housing, a change in the tax rate potentially, and an extension of the sunset. In our most recent iterations of the conversation, an additional item has been brought forward, and it was covered a little bit in that large table that we provided to your board, but really about oversight and governance concerns and transparency. I'm going to throw that in there. So that was an additional topic that has been brought to the table. One of the things that we recognize is not everything is a ballot measure conversation. Some of this is really pursuant to our IGAs, work plans, those sorts of things. So there's a potential for conversation that's not related to a ballot measure that can perhaps smooth out some of the wrinkles that we have. But as we have approached these conversations, we have been very clear with Metro staff that our board has not said yes to anything, that this is just a conversation amongst staff, and that we will not say that the counties are comfortable with anything until our board is comfortable with things. And we have nothing concrete to present to you about what is currently on the table because we haven't had that concrete level of conversation. We're also aware that there are additional stakeholders that Metro is talking to, folks who have a vested interest in tax payment, in housing development and service provision, and the coalitions that came together to support both the affordable housing bond and the supportive housing services tax measure. So all of those folks are part of the conversation. We are not all sitting down together. Just for your awareness, we have been made aware from the COO of Metro that her plan currently is to go to the Metro Council next week to give a update of the data that they have received. It's not a recommendation or even a proposal for there be a recommendation, but more of an opportunity to summarize their polling, their conversations with the stakeholders, their ongoing conversations with the communities of color and other vested partners that are called out specifically in all the supporting documentation around SHS and the counties as well. That is doing two things. One, seeking assurances from their council that they should continue down this path, but also letting people know in a public format this is the data that they're pulling from, is those conversations. Their plan currently is to further push out the potential for a referral until late July, but no dates are certain yet. It's really directive to them as well, what their council continues to tell their COO to do, and how these conversations continue to go with all the vested stakeholders. As we participate in those conversations, we have as we've talked with your board at previous work sessions, we've developed 4 guiding principles that we're double checking with you are in fact your guiding principles to us. Those really did focus on those first 3 potential reforms: expanded use, tax rates, and sunset extensions. The oversight and governance was sort of a new thing, so we didn't necessarily get explicit in the 4 principles, but do think that these principles can cover that if your board is agreeable to them. So I'll turn it to Molly to further expound.
And just, we've talked about these before, but just to reiterate, our themes or guiding principles we talked is we really want to make sure that the focus of any kind of referral still honors the original goals of the supportive housing services measure. So we're aiming to end chronic homelessness and not see any net increase in those inflow of homelessness. For the most part, the stakeholder committee and the other counties are fully on board with what we're hearing is most of the momentum and the themes are really focused on that original goal. And especially if we look at an affordable housing expanded use, the idea being we want to make sure we're building out our supportive housing pipeline. Really, first and foremost, that would be staff recommendation that we would advise because we haven't quite finished out our supportive housing goals, and we could see the use of capital as a strategy to advance those goals. The second theme that we talked about is continue relying on local expertise and the local work we're doing here. That does tie a little bit into some of the issues around governance and oversight. Make sure that it's our county board, it's you all that are advising and guiding us along this journey of the supportive housing and services measure, helping us prioritize across the various strategies of how we're ending and preventing homelessness. We also believe we have been able to connect with our city managers and our city partners. We work very collaboratively with them. We would want to, of course, continue working very collaboratively with our cities around siting and funding decisions and how we build out the fuller system. We have those kind of relationships. I think that is something that they're hearing in other counties. That relationship is a little bit more dynamic. We also need to see flexibility over time. Again, that can tie a little bit of sort of where that could get into some governance and oversight as well. Part of this flexibility is we know our community's needs are going to change. We know that our strategies are going to have to shift as those needs change. We are building up a system, but at some point we will have enough infrastructure that we need to really focus on operations and best practices and what's the level of sustainability we need to see, particularly around rent assistance, governance so where some of those initial conversations with Metro leadership were heading is what we call sort of more of a branching approach. Essentially saying, okay, we'll have a dedicated pot for affordable housing, and then we'll have the separate pot that the counties have been getting for the supportive housing and services portion of the resources. And everything sort of falls from that initial branching, if you will. Governance would be different. The oversight bodies would be different. There would be a set allocation that would then be sort of tied to some kind of escalation each year and year out. But that really does tie our hands going forward of where we may be seeing need to pivot. Where do we need to be maybe going deeper in terms of an affordable housing expansion? But we really want to do that once we make sure our core system is built out and is in place. So some of their initial proposals didn't quite really align with some of these guiding principles. We've since been able to use these guiding principles to hone in on more of what we call a tree approach, more of an integrated, not a branching, but a tree. Let's really look at an integrated possibility of making sure we're aligning the services, we're aligning the capital, and we're aligning the rent assistance in strategies that make sense for those experiencing homelessness in our county. And then the fourth is really related to making sure we're not seeing drastic changes in the way the flows are distributed to the counties. And then of course the distribution between the three counties. The distribution has not come up in conversation thus far. And we do believe the flow of funds is part of some of the areas that Metro would like to explore around governance. And so there's, for us, there's some real potential impacts to how we manage the resources here. Obviously, you all approve our budget. We then execute contracts. We maintain those relationships with those contractors and our community-based organizations, not Metro. But the approval process and decision-making was very different on the affordable housing bond program. And so as we go through this next, we're not quite sure what their current thinking is, but we want to make sure we have the full flexibility to continue executing those contracts on behalf of the county in a streamlined and seamless way.
Approximately how many contracts do you currently manage?
I believe we have 77 just in the room here.
Yeah, we have more than 30 organizations under contract and some.
And of course, day in and day out, we're talking hundreds of thousands of invoices at some point in time throughout the course of a year. So it is a lot of great work that we've done to make sure that is more streamlined. So we don't want any hiccups in that process.
So now's the time for your comments and questions. Who would like to go first?
I have a couple questions and I may have more after I hear their questions.
We'll do round one
Okay,
first.
round one, thank you. Is there, going back to the beginning, your discussion in the beginning, is the goal always to focus on the November election?
They have not
Wavered from that?
wavered from that. They, as has been stated in the stakeholder meetings, they think that that is the most opportune time to go forward, looking at political momentum.
And then next question, Molly, you talked about flexibility. And as you were talking about that, I was wondering about the opportunity for local flexibility around what our needs are. I mean, and I also think that maybe embedded in some of the things that you were saying was reallocation of funds to where the greatest needs might be. Is that, did I hear that piece there? That if a certain county has higher needs, that there's a possibility that we might look at reallocating funds to meet needs. Okay.
Said no
So
Okay,
point
thank you.
4 covers that. It's-
Okay, that's that. Thank you. I was sorry. But is there, it seems to me that we know what's best around wraparound services for homelessness, moving toward housing and affordable housing. Has there ever been a discussion around local decision-making over that spectrum versus just taking money from SHS and putting it into affordable housing?
I would say that's the
Is that the
The-
ultimate point here?
that has been a pitch that has been made to Metro from the county perspective is if you want to allow for conditional use, let us decide what is the most needed thing within our county.
And I recognize that there's been the pitch, and I guess what I'm asking, has there been any response to that pitch other than no
There hasn't been a response at this point.
at all?
It's part of the expected agenda for this afternoon.
Commissioners Willie or Rogers?
It's part of the expected agenda for this afternoon. Is that like this meeting?
No, we are, later this afternoon, we are sitting down with the full Metro and tri-county bodies that,
Oh,
the next version of that meeting. This week's version of the meeting is this
I
afternoon.
thought you had a meeting this morning and that kind of.
I did have,
Another.
no, I had another relevant, to make sure that the three counties have been talking amongst themselves and we were making sure that the three counties were on the same page and we're not getting far afield in preparation for today's meeting. And now those meetings are also hard to schedule and vital to make sure that we don't accidentally get out in front of each other or say things that would impact our ability to be in line with our tri-county chairs and boards.
Particularly important since the local conditions vary
Mhm.
from county to county.
Yes.
So that's where not stepping over one another, jeopardizing what is needed in order to address homelessness in each of the 3 separate counties. Don't worry, we'll go through potentially around 2.
I always try to look at it from somebody else's standpoint, so they have the best arguments they can have. I certainly have not had the involvement that the chair has. I think Pam, you have as well. And this thing I've made this comment before. It doesn't sound like it's very collaborative. It's there's money on the table, so everybody's scrambling, say, how do I spend it? And so being a true partnership, you got one party who was a facilitator and they said, now we get to be captain for the day. But what are really the hydraulics in their mind of wanting to change it? I know why we want to do what we want to do. I think we've articulated that. But what would change that? If Greg Abbott all of a sudden said, I'm going to send up 30,000 people to the region, homeless, would that support their argument any more than what our argument is? Wouldn't think so.
I know if we saw an influx to the region of 30,000 new people who would be added to our homeless counts, that would probably have a very different tone and tenor to this conversation for all of us. It's a challenge to speak for Metro and where they are, but what they have expressed in their public meetings is they see an opportunity as the funding that was available under the affordable housing bond has mostly been expended, is how I've been. Mostly been allocated. Thank you.
By the
Get that
3
wrong.
counties.
By the 3 counties and the other implementing partners. And there is not a lot of other funding that goes with housing, coupled with new forecasts for the amount of revenue that the SHS income tax is providing, led them to a path of, if we expand the potential uses, this is a good thing compared to the history of our success with the affordable housing bond. And we can couple that ongoing and very vocal concern about the level of visible homelessness within our region to see both an expansion of the uses as well as and a dedication to public housing, permanent units, and extending the timeframe for this tax measure out, expanding the sunset. So those confluence of factors has been what has driven this, coupled with political concerns about tax rates in the region, the impacts to the greater economy, and the conversations about the Portland City core. Though that table that was brought together by the governor's office, where multiple perspectives were brought in, and addressing homelessness and reduction of taxes were another part of that conversation, and the potential for an external ballot measure that then could impact our SHS. All of these things mixed together into what Metro has stated is their reason for bringing this now and proposing this bifurcation path of, we will take a portion and put it towards permanent units and keep the services whole.
I think, just follow up, I think you answered many of the questions that we asked in the past. I'm not sure I still understand today. My simplistic way, and again, I've not been involved. It appears, because I remember talking to several counselors at the time, I said, well, why are you getting into the housing business? This isn't even in your repertoire. And they said, because we're being asked to. Our local partners want us to. And we are the vehicle that it can be done because we have under state statute ability to have income taxes. They had that ability. So that's what I was told. Now that there is additional monies that are being raised, it's sort of like the local partners don't really need you a whole bunch. You've gotten your allocation. We now are going to go on our own and establish new policies, or am I misreading it?
No,
Okay.
no.
You're shaking your head. Tell me, straighten me out then. What's occurring?
We are not saying we're going to go on our own.
No, I'm saying they want to do something different than the group of counties.
Well, that you're hitting on what I think is a source of the problem from the latter part of 2020, which is important to remember. 2020, COVID. Right. So there was never really that gelling of partnership. And they had a new Metro Council. It's very different. The council that referred the measure in May and the council that exists today, very different folks. There were 2 or 3 who were similar, but the majority of the 7 are new since. And the latter part of last year and through this year, and we're only halfway through this year, so we really only have 1 year of full operations under our belt face to face. But even so, MPAC meets every other month in person. JPAC, at least once a quarter, they meet in person. So there hasn't been this regularity of relationship development as in the past. As I can attest to, when I was a Metro counselor, I had regular meetings in front of city councils in person. I had in-person meetings with Washington County commissioners. So the level of information sharing and the repertoire of back and forth on conversations, it's why we have, unlike some others, really worked hard at meeting face to face because of the conversational aspect that comes out of our questions.
Let me rephrase, because I know you can tell me the answer. When I said we are going on our own, I was referring to we as Metro, not that.
Yeah.
So it seems from what I'm hearing, from what you're bringing as well, Pam, that the counties seem to be gelling and talking to each other. So we've got Metro kind of going a little different, and I don't know what the hydraulics of why they think they want to run a program versus us.
It's not that they necessarily want to run the program.
Okay.
But I have had I have heard their SHS council liaison say time and time again that they're the ones who've been hearing the criticism of SHS and the presence of homelessness in our communities.
Hmm.
As though we haven't been experiencing it here. And so it's been very puzzling, indeed. It compares and contrasts with the accolades that they have received on affordable housing, right? But even there, it's very much a partnership thing. And there's at least a minimal recognition of, yes, they've leaned into housing. And I think this is one thing that Metro has done quite well with regard to the whole spectrum of housing. They've really leaned into our regional problem, right? The regional problem on affordable housing and that we didn't have enough of it. Our regional problem that we have homelessness across all three of our counties. We have a childcare process too. I mean, a childcare access problem too, but they haven't necessarily leaned into all of the asks. There hasn't been a coalition asking them to solve that problem regionally, nor am I suggesting it. I'm just observing. So, so really that we don't have a solid foundation of partnership, right? And they've had this tension. And the state of affairs in Portland and Multnomah County got a lot harder, not only because of COVID, but also because of all the riots and the destruction in downtown. And so many people, you know, the governor's task force on Central City has tried to do its best to get Portland downtown back on a positive path. And I think I see a positive path. So let me just end it there towards your really what has been behind this. I think it's been that combination of those three things that I mentioned. So I don't want to keep you from your other questions or comments.
No, I keep getting puzzled because it seems like they don't provide the services we do. They have apparently a good coalition of counties who are similar in mind. And I understand that everybody gets excited when they see cash and they like to see that cash continue. But I would think it could come back to us. And so I'm trying to understand the hydraulics on there. I call it. But why would you develop a process that's working, and why would you not work with your partners who are all the delivery folks? I mean, but I'll stop with that. I just don't understand why they would do what they're.
Could I just add one point to it?
Please,
What
yeah.
Catherine was saying, I
me out.
think you hit the nail on the head, at least in part, over the success, perceived success in affordable housing and the perceived lack of success by many around homelessness. And what makes it so kind of unfair, if you will, is that affordable housing is easy to quantify. And the homelessness problem is extremely difficult to quantify. You know, I think we do a good job here in doing that, but
We're talking about human behavior versus sticks and bricks.
Right. And it's also, and it's the perception of our public I think that's leading to a lot of this as well. So to the Metro feeling. The other question okay,
let's go back to round one, finishing round one.
All right.
And then deal with round two. In my round one, I first have a question for you, because I don't think we've had a conversation around SHS that included the MPAC meeting on the SHS reform.
I did do a brief
Could you remind
report.
me
Yes.
of how that went, and was it a dialogue? And
It was a report, and I will refer back to Molly, who listened to it as well. and others in the room. It was a report from the COO. And it was a report from her perspective about the I'm gonna use the term attitude about the people that she is dealing with on the regional stakeholder team. There was several comments about over 50% acceptance of a concept. And not that the concept was firm, but you know, kind of a 30,000 foot concept. And what she neglected to say to MPAC was that stakeholder group that she was referring to and the groups that she was referring to were not necessarily made up of an equal footing of SHS supporters and affordable housing developers and supporters. So it was a little misleading to MPAC, but there wasn't a point where feedback was, there were questions that we could ask. And Commissioner Myron asked several questions, and it was more about, you know, you can't abandon the support for SHS because that's the key element to the success ultimately of housing our unhoused. But other than that, there wasn't much more information nor an invitation for debate. But she did talk for about 10 minutes. The COO did.
The,
Did that answer your question?
yeah, but I think there's also a major piece that the COO seems to be leaving out as a message from the stakeholder table. The first message from the stakeholder table is to, as reflected here in our guiding principle, keep the focus on the original goals.
Of SHS.
Yes,
That was
don't
not,
deviate from that.
that was not part of her discussion.
And then beyond that, if there's something more, here are things we the stakeholder table were willing to examine. But that message of don't disrupt the current efforts was stated in multiple meetings. And I find it bothersome that the COO is not making any effort to reflect that. So I just want to share that.
I'd like to make one comment and then I'm going to ask Molly to comment on that. What I didn't hear was anything from the COO that indicated that there is discomfort at the county level. And that,
So if I could continue, this gets to my point. The counties made a huge effort to deliver information, and it was delivered April 17th at the stakeholder table. And there is no public distribution of that information. So we made sure it was put into the public guide because we followed up here in our, I believe it was April 23rd, Board of Commissioners work session meeting. And all of the county material was brought to life and made available through our meeting packets on April 23rd. But one of the main reasons why, or the main reason why I wanted to come back to the MPAC conversation was to see if that information is being reflected at all by the COO. Because frankly, I'm concerned that as the COO, as you said, meets with the council next week and update on data, I don't believe there is a genuine effort to share that very meaningful information to the Metro Council. That is non-partner. So I think I want to make sure that point is made very clear. While former Metro councils have leaned into the regional scale of our homeless problem, the current council and COO is not. And that is very significant. when this conversation really started, early last fall and actively brought forward to this table since October of last year, we were at that time, since we were forecasting into the end of the year, saying, well, we're only 2.5 years in. Why are you revisiting a 10-year program with only 2.5 years in? And similarly with the stakeholder table being convened. Now, here we are in June. We're 3 years in, right? Looking into the 4th year. And we've had really good results. I question if the council will have the opportunity to hear what those results are. I'm checking off my list here. I just have 2 more comments. I think the public needs to look at Metro's own SHS distribution because it exists, and what activity have they taken on those dollars? And lastly, at the December SHS Oversight Committee, or it might have been November 28th, the last week in November, the Metro economists and financial forecasters came in, gave us a great presentation on the information, the updated forecast information, and the whys and what fors for their having the updated forecast. Now, what we have experienced is collections to date, year over year, has only increased, exceeded the forecast estimate. The state economist just gave a report, and we learned of it through our government relations team, that income tax collections are forecasted to increase again for this current year, FY24. Okay, so yet another, I'm assuming, increased. But this is where the April 17th information comes in really clearly, that the costs to address the goals has increased. An original estimate of 10,000 a person to 15,000 a person. And those costs will continue over the remaining life of the 10 years. I am lacking a thought partner on the Metro Council to address that. If the COO fails to address this before the Metro Council, then it's non-partnership, because we experience these costs together. So I know I'm using clear and stark language here, because I think we have to accept the realities of the situation. And if the Metro Council wants to continue to go about this independently, then they have to be prepared to live with the consequences independently. We would become just a service organization that Metro gives us something to do. We do our best to program that out, but we would not be able to be held accountable towards any results, because there would be no partnership. So it's very troubling. I've pretty much worn myself out trying to have conversations. And we're dealing with half a picture painted. So anyway, those are my long-winded questions and comments for round 1. Now, round 2, Commissioner Treese, you had a question you wanted to come back to.
Well, I think you asked the question, and that was, my question to the three of you is, do we know the level of preparedness that the Metro counselors have in relationship to the information that's available? We know what we're going through. We know what we look at all the time, and we see a pretty high level of information and discussion around this issue. I've had a couple conversations that didn't indicate that maybe there's the same amount of information going to Metro counselors.
I'm always,
No, I'm asking a tough question. Graceful answer is best.
based on the research that your Harrington had her staff assistant do, what we can see from the public's perspective, from the public meetings that they have held, which is how we would assume a public body would meet. They have not received the level and depth of information that has been provided. We have provided to their staff our April 17th presentation and put it in the hands of the council, but their level of what they've done with that and conversations they've had with their internal staff, I can't speak to.
Well,
Just to add to that, I mean, that they recognize they're now needing to bring Metro Council along. Hear that from the staff last week. And that's why they're organizing 2 work sessions. One is try to get them more up to speed of where the whole process has gone, and that's just going to be next week. And then there'll be another one in July that will get to the components, what they believe, if they're ready, if that's what is, if they get the green light. If the early conversations go well, they then will present a recommendation.
And that's on a referral, not about their information sharing.
well, I mean, it'll be, the question is what information will they give their information counselors? So that's the separate thing. Roy, to your,
But before you move off of that, I think what we may need to be prepared for is that they have the work session. The county information may be in the packet, but it may never be brought to life. So I think we collectively as the counties will have to think about going into their next business meeting and provide public comment to really bring forward that's very much missing. I mean, all 3 counties would be willing to go back in and make that presentation all over again.
And you're not talking about county staff, you're talking about elected leadership.
Well, no, we kicked it off. We each 3 chairs had a very specific role, but then our subject matter experts followed that. Yeah. And what did it take? An hour? Were we given an hour?
Yeah, we were provided an hour. I think we went a little long.
Okay.
Questions.
Yeah.
A lot for questions.
So anyway, I just, because the way it's been shared is the COO would go into work session number 1, make a recommendation, which includes here's the information I'm providing to you. And that led me to provide this recommendation. And then their subsequent July meeting would, their work session would lead towards the question of, do they want to move forward with the referral? And then they really only meet for 2 weeks in August, business meeting wise. So they'd have to do the referral before the September deadline.
Just to be clear, in June, the COO has walked back her intention to provide any sort of recommendation.
Oh, that's a change.
It's here's where we are. This is the temperature we're feeling. Do you agree we should go forward? And then an initial recommendation being made in July. Just want to make that.
Yeah. Yep.
wow, okay, so,
So you were going to ask Roy something?
well, I guess. No,
Oh.
it was just a little bit more, my perspective is a little bit more jaded. There's very much more policy driven and probably nicer, but from my standpoint is We remember back when they first put this on the ballot, the projection was $250 million, and they didn't think they could reach that. And so here we are. If you look at, and I pulled up this April work session, and the projections here are in 25, 26 that could hit $480 million. And I think, and since we don't have any more affordable housing money, Metro's kind of looked at that and said, wow, this is a little bit of a gift. We should maybe cap this and peel the rest off, because the voters have already approved this. So we don't have to go back out to them and ask for more money. We could do that, or we could actually say, look how successful this program is. Let's extend the sunset on it 5, 10, 15 years, or let's make it permanent. Let's modify the tax rate so maybe we could get some more money. So there's a whole bunch of variables. I wrote down the tax rate and who's taxed, the length of this thing, Metro's control, how much dollars are collected, the purpose of those dollars, and the type of housing. And you put all those bundles in there, and you look at a package that's already projected to generate nearly $500 million a year. Everybody starts drooling over this possibility. And then Metro realized that they didn't have the control over the SHS money that they really think now that they should have, looking back. So now they're trying to incorporate a Metro control over this. Not looking at us and saying, you've done a good job, keep up the good work, let's talk about this. It's, no, we think we need to pull this back. And quite frankly, I've heard it said that a part of this is that Metro needs some funding for their own housing department. So there's a whole bunch of bad things that are incorporated in this. And I think it's our responsibility as at least the 3 counties to be able to try and keep that on some sort of a course that's acceptable. I don't know what that looks like. I've been very candid with Molly and Aaron that I'd love to see some affordable housing somewhere in here, but not at the cost of taking money from us and giving it to Metro, or not in the process of reallocating our 33% share and giving it to somebody else. So it's kind of like we got a stake in the ground. We're going to try and be nice and be good players in this whole process, but it is it's a very complex and convoluted thing. And if it's being driven by Metro staff and not by Metro Council, that's even more problematic to me. So I think the things that you guys are doing are really good. You're at the table. You're trying to be nice players about this, not accusatory like I am, but I think that's the guidelines I've communicated to you. The 4 that you've got here, I think are good. Let's find something that works for everybody and doesn't come out of our pocket to make it functional.
So I think what you're describing in summary was where the regional stakeholder table was at, where don't disrupt the positive homeless work that's going on. But yeah, there's a technical problem where the rate isn't indexed, year over year. So more people will be coming into the bottom end over those 10 years. So yeah, that sounds like a sensible thing to change. And if you're going to make changes, there could be some logical changes to be made on if in the future there is if there are resources available different than what we're already enabled to do, but need more capital construction for permanent supportive housing or full-on affordable housing. Yeah, we'd be open to that. That's where this 50% statement comes in. But once again, it was don't disrupt the progress on addressing homelessness. So what you also summarized as Commissioner Willie as the various, I call them levers or components that could be discussed. I very much think that is where the conversation will be headed for the Metro Council. Oh, what do we need to put into a referral so that we can get more flexibility on uses? Maybe extend the time, fix this technical thing, so that we can assure the voters that more positive outcomes will happen in the future, but for their voting yes on this thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. All those pieces are gonna come to play on this.
It leaves us
It's
in a position where we know what the costs are. We know what our staff has been over with us time and time again about the additional needs that we need the additional service supports that we need in order to reach these goals, such as the transitional, the treatment, the healthcare that we're adding in now, right? There's a reason why those costs are higher because the service needs are more diverse and clear now. That we've been trying something at a scale that hasn't been done nationwide before. There have been all kinds of successful pilots, but we're in the big leagues here doing this. So that's where we really need better partnership.
So have you heard your message that you needed to hear from us?
Well, I don't want to disrupt round two. I mean,
I'm not sure what message we're giving them that's different.
No, that's
We're
what I'm
s-
saying. They gave us the four.
We're
There's
still willing to
four.
talk,
Yep.
but what are
Absolutely.
we talking about? Are we, to borrow some language I think I've heard you use in the past, but call me on it. It seems like something's going to be done to us.
Heard you say that.
Uh, And
And we're not looking forward to it necessarily.
no, this is,
Like a birthday cake.
Usually you aren't.
Know who the partner is.
So I think one of the things we're looking for today is can staff lean on these four principles as we propose ideas to try to shape Metro's referral? Don't know if we'll be successful, but we want to know, can we lean on these as we're making these proposals? And then it would have, would have to come back to you all so that we can be really clear, like, here's what we came up with based on these principles.
Or at least
Can we
measure
meet
it
any-
for you.
I stand by these four guiding principles. Yep, I bet we all do. The thing though that I'm concerned is that Metro Council does not or would not appreciate, let alone understand, that number one means acknowledging and supporting the cost trends that the counties presented on April 17th. Because given the latest Oregon economist statement, I can see Metro after another fiscal year of data comes in, they'll say, okay, well, now it's going to be mostly, it's just a rev on their latest forecast. Well, what does that buy us? Doesn't buy us anything.
It's devoid of all context. And this is where they keep focusing their forecast on revenues. We keep showing them the sort of expense side of how we're building out a system. And these, rents don't just go up at CPI levels. That's just not a reality we live in. And there's not necessarily a recognition that we have to dedicate per their IGA a certain portion towards certain level of reserves and other kind of regional planning. So when you, Commissioner, when you talk about, 400 and how many, 80 million, the reality is it's, it's a lesser number when you take out the admin to Metro and take out the reserves and then and then we do the escalation. So that's the piece, to the chair's point, that we've not fully seen that reconciliation happen.
Well, and I think that was my point, is they only look at 480 versus the 250 we projected. And so there must be a lot of fluff in there that we think we can pull off and drop into a different bucket. And as far as the state economists and their projections, Roy could do a better job at this than that. I mean, they missed it by $5.2 billion. So,
On the
That was a
upside.
compliment or not?
I'm guessing. You and I'd be out of a job if we ran our business that way. So,
Very.
So I'd like to make a cynical comment here and
there hasn't been any.
Join the.
So am I the only one that has seen the PSA that Metro has put out that talks about the success of the affordable housing?
Oh, no,
program?
you're not the only one.
And that's just been within the last few weeks that I've seen that come
Social
out.
media, radio.
So I am hard pressed not to believe that that's the building of the platform toward this referendum. So I'm just, I'm saying, let's not delude ourselves. Let's be, you think it's going to happen, do you? Yeah. Well, the question is how soon? Or maybe-
So the
Okay.
other just idea that I've had here as a result of our conversation is, well, if Metro's not going to acknowledge our April 17th efforts, then maybe the 3 county chairs need to call a press conference and have our staff present that to the public and the media. Pretty radical. But,
I wouldn't want to pull that trigger yet
oh, I'm thinking like July, August, right?
after they make the recommendation.
But, it's,
Aaron, before taking that step where it was directly public facing,
Mhm.
what are your thoughts about providing testimony at the upcoming work sessions that
They-
are being
no.
held?
their work sessions are just like ours. No public
mean-
comment.
I meant during the next opportunity that we have. I should have said that. So
Council meetings.
I think that there is a definite need to have a direct line of communication to their council, and there are many ways we could approach that, I think. But the advantage of doing it in a public meeting is that it sets the context for the public who is paying attention to those meetings.
I'm tired of talking with Metro councilors in various informal settings without it being a set meeting and being greeted with kind of closed doors.
So the other piece of that is always the challenge is the 2-minute mark. How do we make our points effectively in the 2-minute mark? And we can work on that. And I think that there is an advantage to doing this in the public space, depending upon how clear the COO has been with her council at her presentation. If she's included the information and given life to it, there's hope for the conversation. But if not, there is definitely a role for counties elected officials to come in the public meeting, public testimony portion and use those 2 minutes to tell our story back to back repeatedly.
Well, I think as evidenced by the COO speaking at the SHS Oversight Committee, at MPAC, I don't have faith in the COO adequately bringing the county information to life before the Metro Council. It would have to be done at the county level or by the county experts. So track record just isn't there.
You don't have public comment.
But that's to
It's-
unpack.
Yeah, it's to the, it's not to, there are a couple counselors there, but it's mostly to leaders from around the region. You know, it's not-
Just go on public record, that's all I was saying.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity for a voice on the public record with a couple of.
Yeah.
comments there.
We can write a letter that's a volume if we want. And then just present it in a 2-minute public comment at a council meeting or at an impact meeting, wherever we want.
And also when we have our openings, you know, maybe we need to be a little bit more clear about our funding streams and be talking clearly about the importance of that. I mean, I'm just looking for other times when we can start sending a message. We generally have metro counselors at those types of things.
Generally at the affordable housing.
Well, that's true. Well, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't use that opportunity to talk about.
We have when we've had SHS items, and there's one particular metro counselor who's gone to the SHS Pod Village openings. Not so much the Access Center openings. So, yeah.
I'm just thinking about pinpointing our messages.
Work on that. Get set up.
Fine.
We've already had those talking points. I'm sorry, I've been around this block with
I
our
know.
staff and told, no, we need to limit the number of invitations. No, our partners don't want that many people there.
There are other variables.
Final question for me, and we're treading a lot of the same ground we have every time we've met, but the Oregon Constitution says that if there's excess revenues that are collected, there's a kicker. And Oregonians like that kicker a lot. I can attest to that. Just having completed a tax season, everybody liked a lot. Does that kicker provision of the Oregon Constitution apply to anyone who is levying taxes through measures that are granted by the Oregon legislature?
I'm going to defer to council, and I'm guessing council will need to do some research and get back to
Yes, thank you, Erin. Noted your question. We'll get back to you.
Yeah, I'd be curious. It's,
I don't know. I
Oh,
can't think
brother.
of any. Can you?
Now we're talking about giving it back to the taxpayers rather than the metro. I don't know.
I'm just asking if that is in the law. Nobody's looked at that, I don't think.
They would have brought that up.
Not sure what it
Maybe
was,
not.
but we can.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, hang on a second. The Metro Charter specifically addresses that the legislature has enabled them to do a sales tax. I don't know, Metro doesn't have some special authority on an income tax as evidenced by Multnomah County on their preschool for all, which is also an income tax. So it's based on examining state law that enables any jurisdiction separate from the state to do an income tax measure. That's your question.
It could be. I mean, if
It's because I think I convinced myself we need to rephrase the question because it isn't a special authority to the Metro Service District by the state legislature.
there's only one or two jurisdictions that have an income tax, are allowed to have an income tax. I think it's TriMet and Metro.
No, that's what I'm trying to say.
Multnomah County
Multnomah
just
County has one with preschool for all,
That's true.
which has led me to the point that
That's true.
these haven't been specifically enabled as bodies, but rather there are provisions in state law that allow governments or jurisdictions to put these before the voters, and then the voters have to approve it. So your question is, for any voter-approved income tax, if the collection is greater than the forecast, I believe our kicker is part of a constitutional.
It is.
So does that
It is.
constitutional requirement require the kicker to be applied to those larger than forecasted revenues?
Yes, yes, and that's saying it well. Now, if, what would my bottom line be? Get back to, they need to redistribute it for the purposes that we talked about, because then the forecast would not be exceeding.
So to our interim county council, I think what we're asking you to do is to follow up with the Oregon Department of Revenue and or the Oregon Department of Justice, let alone your own research, to see if what provisions exist in state law for income tax measures. Does the kicker apply? So,
Don't I bring up fun ones at the end of the day?
hey, you're all about the numbers.
I know, I'm all about
Yeah, I
that.
was gonna say, be careful what you ask.
Yeah. And I really appreciate how for both the affordable housing programs, all of our Washington County Housing Authority programs, and this supportive housing services program, organizationally, we've really leaned into having information open and transparent, documented, shared, and having these open discussions. I know I've learned from your comments and your questions here that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise if we hadn't done this. So this is hard stuff, but good on us as a county and as a 3-county region for doing the hard stuff, because homelessness is a problem nationally, and we're really trying to do something about it and improve people's lives. Thank you.
Thank you,
Good
Mark.
luck with the remainder of your meetings. Might have to come back to us in a week or two.
Yes, I will keep you informed.
Okay, we're going to, unless someone has something else, we're going to adjourn the work session for today, June 4th, 2024. Thank you.